Great, so we're recording. Thank you everyone for joining us today. This is our second session in our ACE webinar series. Today's is titled, What is Architecture? So if you attended last week's What is the Built Environment, we did an overview of the industry as a whole. It was a very information-filled session. Today we're going to specifically the architecture industry sector. We're going to do a little bit of a reminder on the information that we gave last week, brief overview of that information, and then we're actually going to be joined by three panelists who are in the field of architecture today to talk a little bit about what their role is in the industry as well as how they got to the point where they are today. So before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. As I mentioned, we're recording today's session, so I do please ask that you use the chat box feature if you have any questions or comments. We do also have, if you see in the corner, there's in the top of your screen, there's a few little shapes, triangle, square, circle. There's a Q&A feature on there as well. That is what we will use for the end of the session for our Q&A with our panelists. But if you have any other comments you want to add, feel free to use the chat box feature. In addition, we ask that you please stay muted and enjoy today's session. So first, a little bit of overview, as I mentioned. So when we talked last week, we were talking about the built environment industry from the perspective of residential construction. The recording of that session will be circulated if you missed it. But when we talked about that, we were talking about the perspective of if you wanted to build a house. And when we talked about that, we mentioned that when you want to build a house, the first person you'd hire is an architect, because the architects develop the design concept for the construction of a home. And although visual aesthetics are an important component of the work of an architect, architects must create designs that are functional as well as compliant with building laws and regulations. So architects have a complex role in the construction process and are involved from beginning to end. We're going to go over in more detail what specific roles of architects are, but as a general overview, some responsibilities may include understanding the client's requirements and translating them into design drawings and models, quantifying and qualifying the project, for example, the budget, site characteristics, and regulations, developing a sequence of operations and keeping records for daily progress or budget reports, managing the bidding process when contractors bid on jobs, clarifying details for engineering and construction teams and making changes to plans per their recommendations, and certifying that the work is completed in the prescribed manner. And we also talked about the general overview that there are multiple different types of architects. These three main categories: an interior designer focusing on the inside components of a home, and a landscape architect focusing on the outside, and a general architect. But there are many different specialties that you can have within that industry field. So as I mentioned, that was just a brief reminder of our concepts that we discussed last week. I'm going to stop presenting my screen, and the majority of today's agenda is going to be focused on hearing from our three panelists. So as you can see on your screen, we have Maggie, Tariks, and Casey. You feel free to pin them to your screen. It might be easy to see and hear from them as well. But I'm going to be asking them a few questions. You're going to hear from all three of them as it relates to their role within the field of architecture. So welcome. Thank you guys so much for joining us today and for allowing us to hear your story and your work within the industry. I appreciate it. This is going to work for our attendees. Ask the question, and all three panelists are going to answer it. For ease of understanding, we'll go in the same order each time. And so as it appears on my screen, we'll start with Maggie, then we'll hear from Tariks, and then we'll hear from Casey, if that is okay with our panelists today.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. So just to set the stage, I'm going to ask if you introduce yourselves, full name, your title, and the organization that you work for. Any other information about yourself you want to share to introduce. Maggie, go ahead.
Sure. I'm Maggie Gadrioli Pritchard. I'm an architect at Port Copeland Mocked Architects here at our Baltimore office, and I work within the education studio there.
Great, thank you. Tariks?
Hi, my name is Tariks Saleh. I am an architect as well. I work at Erskine Gross in their architecture studio. I am a lead designer with the firm. I've been there for about 6 years now. And before that, I actually worked at Copeland Mott for about 10 years before joining ASG. So,
Perfect. Thank you. And Casey.
I'm Casey Parker. I'm a design manager, project architect at Gensler's Baltimore office. I've been there about 6 years. Prior to that, spent about 10 years working in the DC market as an architect.
Perfect. Thank you. And I know many of our students on the call today are ACE Baltimore students. All three of our panelists today are highly involved in ACE Baltimore. Some of you who are probably have worked with them before in some of the teams. So we're so lucky to have you today, and everyone else, all of our other ACE Baltimore students get to hear from you. So the next question focuses a little bit more about how you became interested in architecture, what your background is from childhood. So tell us a little bit more about that background or what initially sparked your interest in the field. Maggie?
Sure, yeah. I'm a little abnormal from most people that you'll talk to about how I got interested in architecture. I feel like the norm is, I just knew I wanted to do architecture since the very beginning, and that wasn't true for me. I always had interests in art and math, so it was kind of two very different sides of the spectrum. Art being, I was really interested and fueled by showing creativity and having just that outlet, but I also, really enjoyed math and kind of the rigidity and the logistics behind it. So I knew I had to marry those two. It was a little unclear how that would happen. But I also knew I needed a career that would give back to others, really benefit a community in a direct way. And it was actually one of my high school friends when we were starting to look at colleges, starting to look at what we wanted to major in, and she was interested in architecture. And right when she said that, I was like, okay, art, math, and then, benefiting communities and shaping the built environment. So ever since that's when I started really delving into architecture. And the more I got into it, the more I explored, the more I just knew that was my calling. So, yeah.
Great. Tarik?
sorry to say, but I also have a sort of an atypical, way I got to do what I do. I actually, I've always loved design. Used to draw a lot when I was a kid, but I also really focused on automotive design. That's really what I wanted to do. I still kind of do that on the side, kind of doodle around. But, I grew up in Lebanon, which is, the system is a little bit different. And so when I got to college, I said, I don't know what to do because that specialty did not exist in Lebanon. So my twin brother, was doing architecture, and I started seeing these really cool models, and all of a sudden we have a computer in the house, which is 1996, a long time ago. Nobody had computers, but so I thought that was pretty cool. And I said, well, if I can't design cars, I could probably design buildings. So I went into architecture school, and I did very well. And then I decided to obviously come to the States and pursue a higher education. Do the master's degree here, and that's all in the past now.
Wonderful. And Casey?
So I had a family friend growing up whose father was an engineer, and I was always under the impression that was sort of what I wanted to study. So as I was in high school, I was lucky that I went to a high school that had a vocational technical program, and within that school they taught drafting as a course you could take, and I took it through high school and was under the impression I was going to go to college for engineering until my senior year, and the carpentry program in the VOTech school was actually building a house, and they needed somebody within our program to draw plans. And at that point, myself and another student were asked to help draft plans for the carpentry group to build, and I absolutely fell in love with it and said, I think this might be more where I want to go with my career. So at that point, went to a small local school and got an architectural engineering degree for undergrad, and then decided to continue to pursue architecture and went and got a master's degree at Virginia Tech.
Great. Casey, I love that because it's that hands-on experience that kind of sparked your interest. And you also kind of identified what some of your interests are and your skills, and in just understanding what the industry of architecture was, which was probably the first hurdle, realizing that those skills greatly applied. So hopefully for our students on the call, a little bit of information today, as well as our ACE program, will be able to help do that. So some of you have mentioned it briefly in your last answer, but of course, if you want to elaborate. So after high school, what are some of the steps you took to enter the field, not only higher education, but maybe your first entries into the field, or what were some of the things you did in college past your education to be able to prepare yourself for the field?
Sure. Well, I'm going to go a little bit before college. In between my junior and senior year of high school, I went to the University of Illinois' Discover Architecture Camp, and it was a summer camp that lasted about 2 weeks there at the university. And I think that was really important for me. One, because I wanted to take this course and decide if architecture was for me before I, committed to a university with that main focus. And frankly, spent the money on a major that I wasn't maybe sure about. So after I took that 2-week course, again, I was like, okay, architecture is definitely what I'm interested in. Just how creative and collaborative it is. It was wonderful. So I would encourage all the students to look into summer courses like that, because there's a lot out there. There's a lot out there that offer scholarships for that as well. And I think a lot of them are actually even virtually. So they're still continuing. After that, I know that I needed to find a college that was NAAB accredited, because I knew that I wanted to start taking my architectural registration exams right after college. So as long as you find a school that's NAAB accredited and that has either a Bachelor of Architecture or a Master's of Architecture, then you can go straight into your testing. And one way I found out that accreditation process was through a forum, Design Intelligence, and it's actually firms rank their interns and their recent hires based on their ability straight out of college. So how fast can we put these graduates to work? And that's where the ranking of the schools come from. So I kind of went through that list and visited the schools and just size, what other courses they offered, and even study abroad programs. There were 2 schools where one was going to France, one was going to Italy. So I obviously wanted to do the Italy one because I'm Italian. And I think another thing that I looked at was how long to get a master's. I chose Kansas State University, which I highly recommend. I loved it. And they went straight for a 5 years master's. So another benefit was I just didn't have to pay for a 6-year of college. Other schools will have a traditional 4 and 2 to get a master's, so that's 6 years in total. But looking at that accreditation, looking at Design Intelligence, and just going to the schools if possible to kind of get a feel of the campus, that was kind of my high school, college experience.
Yeah, I wanted to mention really quickly, Maggie mentioned about the summer programs or summer enrichment. ACE does have some summer programs that we can participate in, and some we partner with, continuing to push that resources out. So as we move further, please use us as a resource if you're interested in those. And a little plug that I probably should have done beforehand, as we're talking about these college programs, Maggie, I appreciate that you talked a little bit about, what that process in identifying the school looks like for you. We'll be having a session next week within our ACE webinar series to talk a little bit about some local programs, but also we'll be continuously pushing information on scholarships, both locally and around the country that have options for you all, and specific programs, as well as we're here for a resource to help identify those programs. So Maggie, thank you.
Yeah.
Tarik?
Yeah, since I mentioned earlier that I grew up in Lebanon and went to high school in Lebanon, it's a little bit different for us. But I would say there's a couple of things that I kind of learned along the way that I think would be valuable. Maggie mentioned, or Casey mentioned the importance of like hands-on experience, and I think one of the things that we do at Air St. Gross is give out like internships, not necessarily for college students, but also for high school students. So we've had a few high school students that will come and spend about 2 to 3 weeks with us in the office. They'll do shadowing. And so they'll sit down with folks. They'll kind of see what it's like to become an architect on a sort of a day-to-day basis, which is kind of nice. I think if you know somebody or if you're well connected with somebody, then definitely take advantage of that and see if you can get into an architecture firm. And there's a lot of great local architecture firms in the area that are probably willing to do that. Also, as a side note, a lot of architecture programs have a very strong connection with the local architectural community. And a lot of, like, for example, we are on the Friends of Morgan board, Morgan State University, which is one of the 2 accredited programs in the state. And so, we do offer a lot of internships for Morgan State students and help support that school. So if you're looking for schools, that you should look at that. Make sure that they have a good connection to local architecture firms. It kind of facilitates internships and also employment right after graduation. On a side note, if you're still a junior or sophomore in high school and you're thinking about architecture or design as a profession, I think find out what your hobbies are like. What are you passionate about? I mean, I was passionate about design. I knew that early on, and design is general. If you learn to be an architect, you can design a lot of things. There are architects that design products, home products, knives, things like that, really very silly, but their design is something that can apply to a lot of different fields. So if you're somebody who's interested in design, make sure you research that. When you travel, look at buildings, look at the built environment, make sure you take advantage of those opportunities to expose yourself to what the design profession could be in the future for you. I think those are good lessons to take with you to college.
Tarik, thank you. And Casey?
Yeah, so my path was a little more circuitous coming out of high school. I applied to numerous colleges. I'm originally from West Virginia, from a very small town, and got accepted to a handful of places. And one of those places was the local college that had an architecture program, an architecture engineering program, but it wasn't an accredited program. But I got a full ride to go there, so it was a very easy decision to go to the school that gave me a full ride for college. So I got a 4-year degree in architecture engineering, and because it wasn't an accredited school, I had to go to get a master's in architecture. And like Maggie spoke about, there's 4+2 programs. I had to go and do a 3-year master's program to get the master's of architecture degree. And at that point, West Virginia doesn't have any accredited architecture programs. So we use what's called the Academic Common Market, which is a program that's set up for states where a program doesn't exist. You can go to other schools in other states and pay in-state tuition to go to those schools. So there were, I think, 10 schools that were available for a master's program, and Virginia Tech happened to be one of them. I applied and got in. Went to school there for 3 years. And then post-school, it was really more a question of understanding where I wanted to live and work and where opportunities were. I worked in the Roanoke, Virginia area for a little while before eventually taking a job in Northern Virginia, then in DC, and now in Baltimore. So I'm slowly creeping north in my career. But I agree wholeheartedly with what Tariks was saying about figure out what your passions are and figure out what you like and enjoy. And to Maggie's point of really investigating schools, because every architecture school is a little different. Their approach is a little different, or how they like to teach is a little different. So I think truly going and understanding what the program offers is important. And I think also understanding that maybe a 4-year college opportunity isn't right for you, but there's still pathways to gain licensure and become an architect beyond the typical path.
Definitely important to highlight, Casey. Thank you. So we heard a little bit about kind of like how you got interested and how you got to be today. So now we're going to transition a little bit into what your role looks like now in the organization you work for. Most of the students on the call today are from the Baltimore area. So understanding, as we heard, there's plenty of opportunities, but hearing more about what is specifically in the Baltimore area is great, and the firms that are here. This is a representation of some, but not all. So Maggie, can you tell us a little bit about the company that you currently work for, as in the size, some of their specific, I know you said you work in the education sector, but what, some of the other work that they do, and a little more detail on Hort Copeland Mott.
Sure. Yeah. So I work with Hort Copeland Mott here in Baltimore. We're an integrated firm, which means that we have different studios within our firm. So we have architects working at HCM, we have landscape architects, we have planners, interior designers, graphic designers. So it's a really integrated and collaborative process, which I love, all under one roof. We do have multiple offices. The Baltimore office is the original office, but we have offices in Alexandria, Virginia, which kind of represents the DC metro area. We have an office in Denver, Colorado, and then a Charlotte, North Carolina office as well. And then in all of those offices, we have different studios, so different typologies of buildings that we work on. I'm in the education studio, so we work on projects from K through 12 and higher education. But, a lot of my colleagues work in different studios, housing, mixed use, senior living, healthcare, and then landscape and planning has their own studio as well. But that's one of the things that I love about HCM is that there's such a varied, viewpoints, specialists all under one roof, that, sharing and collaborating with each other is a really easy process and very much, encouraged, which I love. We are about 250 people and kind of still growing. So there's a lot of resources around. And it's just a wonderful place to work. We do a lot of outreach in the Baltimore area. So we do Architect for a Day for high schoolers. We do portfolios, reviews for local universities and colleges. And that's kind of HCM in a nutshell. Yeah.
Maggie, thank you. And Tariks.
Actually, Gross is very similar to Hort Copeland Mott, although the main difference is that most of our work, I would say maybe 85 to 90% of the work is in higher education. And so what that means is we do a lot of work for a lot of the different colleges and universities throughout the country. And we are probably national experts in master planning. So we've done a lot of master plans for a lot of the major universities in the US. And from that, it feeds into projects for us. Science, technology also is a big thing that is very, I guess, popular right now. We're working on developing a lot of these innovation districts throughout the country as well. I've done a few of those. My role at ASG is I'm a lead designer. So my task mainly is when I start working on a project is to help set the sort of the design vision behind the building and the architecture of the building, and working with obviously our principals and obviously younger staff to help kind of carry through the project through the kind of documentation and construction phases. One of the things that I think is always a something that I see as an issue is kind of you gotta know what you like in architecture, whether you're a designer or whether you're like to manage project, you like to manage people. But one of the things that they don't teach you in school is there's a huge sort of business development side to our profession. So you have to also be good at developing relationships, being able to connect with folks and people. So part of that is also having a hobby of your own, something that you like to do, whether it's playing golf or whether it's playing football or whatever it is. I think one of the things that people don't tell students of architecture is you got to have something other than architecture in your life that you're passionate about, because I think it helps you connect with other folks that share the same interest. And I see that as a great kind of business development tool, especially as you grow older and become more senior in our profession.
Great advice, Tarik. Thank you. Casey?
So I work for Gensler in their Baltimore office. We have about 45 people in our office here in Baltimore. We mainly specialize in a lot of corporate office buildings and corporate interiors work. We do a wide range of other things too. We do a lot of defense and aerospace work in our office. Gensler as a firm is an international firm, has 50 offices across the world, roughly about 6,500 employees. We are an architecture-only office. We don't include any engineers or anything. I think the last time the reports came out, we were the largest pure architecture firm in the world. Mainly, we're focused on architecture and interiors. The firm started in the 60s mainly as an interior architecture firm. They do a huge variety of stuff, and every office is a little different. Done everything from high rises in China to the work at T. Rowe Price here in Baltimore. So my role at the Baltimore office, I've been the technical director for a handful of years, which really, to Tarik's point of understanding what you enjoy as part of the job, I think I realized pretty quickly when I was in school that I was not going to be the lead designer pretty quickly. But what I do enjoy is sort of understanding the nuts and bolts of how things go together. So I tend to be the person who would lead a project through code review, through the constructability review of how we're actually going to build this design that the designers put together, and then really running as the point person through construction documents and being the point person through construction administration. So once we finish the drawings and the contractor's building everything, I would be the architect who goes into the field and monitors what's happening and makes corrections or provides advice on how to remedy situations that may occur. I also worked more recently as a manager, design manager. So really being the person who's managing the larger internal team, the outside consultants, the engineers that we might need on a project, but also managing the client and what their expectations may be, and managing the budget and making sure that we're not doing anything that is causing strife for the owner, or we're not overspending our own internal money.
Great. And Tarik and Casey, you talked a little bit in detail about your roles, and I wanted to give you a chance to expand on anything about your specific role within HCM. Of course, Tarik or Casey, if you have additional comments, but Maggie.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that one. I've been fortunate at HCM where really I've kind of been on every phase of a project, from creating proposals to construction administration work and constructing the building. But right now, as an architect at HCM, I work as a project manager. So Casey kind of touched on that, where it's just managing the project, it's managing the client, managing your design team, managing your consultants, and helping out with the CA portion of the work, which is construction administration. So that's kind of what I focus on. And within the education studio, my projects are mainly in the K through 12 sector. So a lot of schools, both private, public, charter, things like that.
Great, thank you. Yeah, you all talked a little bit about the projects you work on currently, and we know, as you all mentioned, there's been phases in your career and different roles that you've held. So throughout any of the roles you've held, want to talk a little bit about what your favorite project you work on. We talk a lot in the built environment, and for our students who haven't heard this before, one of the greatest perks about working in this industry is you can walk around and be able to look at something and say, I was a part of that, and I did that, and I put my stamp on that project, whether that is here through architecture and designing it, physically constructing it, or everything else in between. So I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about what that favorite project might have been. Maggie?
Yeah. I think all of the projects that I work on, there's something that makes them unique that, I appreciate it in a different way from the others. But one of the recent projects that I've been a part of is a community engagement center here in Baltimore. And that one was really interesting, not only because it kind of stepped out of the K through 12 education sector for a little bit, and it was, kind of a taste of something new. But I really enjoyed the community engagement portion of it, really listening to the client, what they needed, knowing that this would be a building that wasn't just for students, parents, and staff, but this was a building that would be used by all ages, all needs, anyone from going there to have daycare to elderly who would go to this building to have a physical exam. So just kind of going back to what I wanted my career to be, to, benefiting communities, shaping like how people navigate life. I really felt like this building will do that. So that's one project that really stood out to me. And it just recently completed construction. But I think not just project specific, but one of the things that I enjoy most about having projects completed is seeing the people interact with your designs, knowing that your design, your built environment is going to become like a fabric of their life. It's just like this overwhelming feeling of joy and gratitude, and it never gets old, from the first time it happened to me to up until now. It's just wonderful. Yeah.
It's amazing. Tarik? Oh, I think you're still muted, Tarik. Sorry.
There you go. Sorry about that. Well, like Maggie said, every project is unique. There's a lot of circumstances and players that make every project unique. So, but I do want to bring up this one project that we did in Providence, Rhode Island. It was completed a couple of years ago, and one of the things that I really liked about the project was sort of the collaborative nature of the work. As a designer, you got to work really hard to prove yourself really worthy to carry the vision of the client through, and it's something that I 15 years into doing this, I still have to do on a day-to-day basis. But I think that project really helped put me on the map as a designer, really showcased my ability to manage the design process, to be able to take the vision of the client all the way through to construction, which was great. So I ended up building a lot of great relationships with the client, also the contracting team. We had a great contractor. It's very rare, I would think my colleagues would agree, that it's really very rare to work with a contractor who shares your vision for the design and will work really, really hard to help you achieve that vision. So I really enjoyed working on that project.
Tarik, thank you. And Casey?
I'm going to echo my two colleagues on the idea. I don't know if I necessarily have a favorite there's always a moment on every project that's always interesting. I think for me, I like to try to solve the unsolvable problem. That's always my favorite part of the job, which is what's the hardest and toughest part of this project, and how can I create the solution that works? So we had a project a few years ago, high rise, where the client decided they wanted to put a new stair in the building and connect 4 floors in a high rise, for it to be a sort of open, more decorative communicating stair, so that people could go up and down. It wouldn't be enclosed. So that immediately just becomes a nice little project for me to sit down and start working out, well, how are we going to do this? And in the end, we came up with these amazing visuals of using this stair that communicates all the way up, but then you've got a 4-story wall that you have to do something with too. So we did these really cool installations of glass fins that we put dichroic film on the fins, and then installed light fixtures adjacent to the fins. So as you walked around the space, the fins changed color from sort of pink to blue across the color spectrum. So depending on where you're standing, the wall looks hot pink or it looks cobalt blue. So it's a really, really cool feature. And to see that finished and installed was pretty awesome. And to see that interaction of the client at the end of the day too, who go, like, this is way more than our expectations, could have ever thought of. That's always the fun part of the job.
And thank you also. As we approach the end of the session, I really wanted to give one last opportunity. I think all the students and guests here on the call today could say that the information shared gave a ton of great advice for students wanting to enter the field. But I want to kind of give one last opportunity to add anything else you didn't. Specific traits or skills maybe you would think would be honed in on if you were deciding to go into the field of architecture, or colleagues that you work with within your own firms. What do you look for to be successful in the industry? Just any last tips and tricks of advice? Maggie?
Yeah, I have 3 that I kind of outlined, so I'll run through those quickly. I would say the first, and this is in no particular order, they're all important, but surround yourself with people who inspire and support you. So obviously that relates to what job, what firm you choose. Make sure you feel comfortable in that environment. And, if you're at an interview and they seem excited to hire you, like, they should be as excited to hire you as you are excited to work for them. Because that's, the first indicator if they will support you and they will listen to you later on in your career. The second one is I always like to kind of do like a yearly check-in on myself, kind of like a self-reflection. Is my career going the way I want it to be? Am I continuing to follow my passion? And if there's any reason where I feel like I'm falling a little bit short, or I feel like something needs to change, ask yourself what you can do about that. You have to be the active problem solver. Take it upon yourself to advocate for yourself and for the life that you want to lead. So just take that time to think about that, because that can really alter your future. And hopefully, if you do surround yourself with people who support you, when you come to them with these, I kind of want to change my direction a little bit, they'll be able to listen to you and support you through that. And then the last thing that I wanted to say was, in design, always be sure to keep empathy at the forefront of your designs. Think about how it's going to affect others. Sometimes people think that architecture and design can be a little bit egotistical, but I don't think that's true. It's really how you approach it and what your beliefs are. So empathy is really a key driver in design.
That was great. Tarik?
Really good question. I'll approach it from a personal level, as well from just like from an interview level. So I think one of the things that I look for when I meet with somebody and for like interviews or even somebody who's interested in architecture, and one of the advice that I give them is I want to see passion. I think you have to be passionate about the profession to be successful in it. Be prepared to spend a lot of sleepless nights because we're it's not necessarily a nine. You can make it a 9 to 5 job, but it's really not necessarily a 9 to 5 job. And also, like, you got to have a certain level of confidence. You have to be able to speak and be able to take an idea from a piece of paper and be able to translate that well to a client. Those are really good skills that I think that I look for in potential candidates. But I think there's a lot of other traits. Obviously, the profession is so diverse and so broad. But again, those two things I feel like are really important for somebody kind of starting out.
Thank you, Casey.
I think the one thing that I would maybe say with this profession is, especially to younger people, is don't shy away from exposure from just about anything that's out there. This is a field that is very broad and has it touches a lot of different things. Not just design, but construction, and you can go a lot of different directions in this field. You can go a much more scientific approach to architecture. You can go with a much more artistic approach to architecture. So just about anything and everything has some level of connection and will touch in this field. So it's the type of field where if you get an opportunity to experience a lecture on music or art or science, it's all applicable. That's, I think, why I really chose this profession, was that you sort of have to know a little bit about everything to do this profession well.
Well said.
Yeah. It was always explained to me that that's what an architect is. They know a little bit about a lot of things. So I would say that, and I think that the thing that I always look for in people is drive, an ability to sort of be a self-starter and to push yourself, especially when you come out of school. I think that there's a little bit of hesitancy sometimes because it's a new space. And I think the sooner you get your feet under you and you start to understand what's being asked, and the more you work in this profession, the more you learn. I've been working now for 17 years, and I learn something new every day while doing this job after 17 years, which I find fantastic. It's never boring.
Well, I definitely want to thank all of you. I know we have reached our 3:45, but I also wanted to open it up. Of course, there, as I mentioned, to the left of the time at the top of our screen, there is a square circle triangle icon that lists a Q&A portion underneath of it. If you had any questions that you want to ask students, please do use that feature. But I wanted to thank once again Maggie, Tariks, Casey. I think your insights into the industry and your path show a lot and give a lot to the students. So thank you. Can't thank you enough, not only for today, but for your continued help with ACE. While we have, if anyone does have Q&A, while we have our students' ability to type it out, if you want to give a little background into your ACE experience, I think that could be great, not to put you on the spot. Because I want to emphasize to our students, if your school does have an ACE Baltimore program, please keep that in mind as we head into the January start of our program year. And I know all of you are here because you signed up for the ACE webinar series, but please tell your friends and continue to look out for our next series. Next one's on Thursday of construction management. So Maggie, you want to tell a little bit about your involvement in this?
This is my 5th year being an ACE mentor, and I think it's my 4th year being an ACE team lead at HCM. So I oversee the Eastern Tech High School team, and it's been a wonderful experience. And I got involved because I didn't really have mentors to help guide me to what the next steps in architecture would be after high school. So I wanted to make sure that others had that opportunity. So that's kind of what got me interested in these.
Thank you. Terry?
Yeah, I actually started with ACE in 2004 or 5, I believe, very early in the Baltimore chapter's days. And I was sort of a team captain for a number of years. And then I took a couple years break while I was teaching at Morgan State. And I couldn't really do all that at the same time. So I took a couple years break, and then one of the board members approached me to kind of come back and lead the Christian Redeemer School team. That was like 3 or 4 years ago now. So I'm happy to be back at mentoring young students. So it's great. I'm also trying to be more active on the board as well. Hopefully, can really when time allows. But I really like the program. I think it's done a lot for a lot of the students that have come through it. I stay in touch with a few of them. We actually had one of my past students come and interview for a position, just before the COVID-19 outbreak, which was great to see her back and see what she's doing and be able to kind of get her work, which is fantastic. So very satisfying. I'm really happy that the program's here, and it's hopefully here to stay.
Thank you. Casey, and then we have a few questions.
Sure. You want to jump to the questions?
Sure, yeah. So on a administration side, did have a question about the recording. This session will be available. The recording will be available to all, as well as the other ACE webinar series sessions. They will be housed on a Google Drive, which will be emailed out to all of you, as well as on acebaltimore.org under the program. So by the end of this week, you'll start to see those recordings pop up, and you can view those later. To our panelists, we talked a little bit about what schools you went to, but there was a question on the specific types of degrees that you would recommend to be successful in the field. So maybe a little specific on the titles or the specific bachelor's degrees or otherwise. Anyone who wants to speak on it.
Take a stab at it. I guess, Maggie and Casey mentioned earlier the type of, at least briefly, the type of degrees, but generally, you need a master's degree or professional degree in architecture to be licensed as an architect. I mean, you could work your entire career and not be licensed, but I think to really carry that title full-heartedly, you need to have that license. Right? So either that's a 5-year bachelor's degree in architecture or a 4-year Bachelor of Science in Architecture with kind of a 2-year master's degree. And there's a lot of different schools that offer the 3+2 or the 4+2, where you can take extra credits during your undergrad, and that counts towards the master's program. So again, knowing your school, knowing what the school offers is really important. So I think I did a 5-year bachelor's and then a 2-year master's. So I have like 7 years of education to be where I am right now. But you don't have to stay that long in school to become an architect.
And kind of bouncing off of that, another student asks, is there an independent way to use the architect degrees that you may get without going into a larger firm or company? If anyone wants to speak on that or an experience you have.
Sure. So you definitely can operate as an independent architect. In fact, I don't think we really talked about that much about the scale of the profession. We all work in offices and firms, which does provide a certain perk, which is, we work for another company and we're employees. So we go to work every day and get to work on interesting and cool projects with a group of people. There are plenty of firms out there, though, and almost all of them started because one person decided they wanted to start an architecture firm. They had work and they had a degree, and that's why they started. I think all of our firms have, Hort Copeland Macht and Ayer St. Gross and Gensler. All of those names that you hear were people that usually their last names. So those people decided one day to start an architecture firm, and it starts with one person and grows from there. So it's very possible to have an office of 1 or 2 people up to hundreds of thousands of people.
When I started at HCM, there were 45 people in 2004. So it's grown tremendously.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that you kind of mentioned that a little bit. Another question was asked on, does work usually handle, are you working individually most of the time in your role and or with a large team? I know we talked a little bit about that in your answer to your questions, and it probably depends a lot on the firm, but in your experiences, would you say that the environment of being an architect is one or the other or a combo?
Yeah, I would say being an architect is very collaborative. You're almost always working in a team environment. And it also depends on the scale of the project and the scope of it as well. How many consultants you're going to work with. But you're always working with others, and it also depends on the firm. But I think that's one of the joys of architecture is, you get to work with others on a daily basis and learn from others rather than kind of working in a silo just at your desk. It's one of the perks that I see of architecture.
That's great. Thank you. As currently, those are all the questions we have, and I know we are over in time. I want to thank the three of you again for being panelists today and for all of our attendees. You guys all have my email because it has come out with today's meeting information. Please feel free, if you do have questions or follow-up information as you sit and think about today's session, you can always reach out, and if I do not know the answer, I will get you a connection from one of our panelists or someone else who does. So we look forward to our upcoming series. Reminder, Thursday, what is construction management? Another specific industry sector, and this recording will be available soon. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Maggie, Tariks, Casey. Can't thank you enough.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.